States has sent out to its close strategic partner, India. Soon after India signed a 10-year contract to operate Iran's Chabahar Port, the US issued a stark warning that its sanctions on Tehran still remain in place and anyone considering business deals with that country needs to be aware of the potential risk. Responding to a question on India's pact with Iran, Deputy Spokesperson for the US State Department, Vedant Patel, told the media, "We are aware of these reports that Iran and India have signed a deal concerning the Chabahar Port. I will let the government of India speak to its own foreign policy goals vis-a-vis the Chabahar Port as well as its own bilateral relationship with Iran. I will just say, as it relates to the United States, US sanctions on Iran remain in place and we will continue to enforce them. Anyone considering business deals with Iran needs to be aware of the potential risk that they are opening themselves up to and the potential risk of sanctions." When a reporter asked if there is any exemption for India's Chabahar Port deal, Patel's response was an emphatic no. On Monday, in a historic development, India signed the contract to operate Chabahar Port in Iran, built with Indian aid, to expand trade with Central Asia. The port on the Gulf of Oman will provide Indian goods a gateway to reach landlocked Afghanistan and Central Asia using a road and rail project called International North-South Transport Corridor. Significantly, this route bypasses Pakistan and it's taken India 2 decades to get here. New Delhi had first proposed this plan back in 2003, but US sanctions on Iran over its suspected nuclear program slowed down the port's development. A long-term agreement to develop the Chabahar Port has been signed by Indian Ports Global Limited and the Port and Maritime Organization of Iran. IPGL will invest about $120 million and another $250 million will be raised as debt. The ceremony for the signing of the pact was attended by Sarbanand Sonowal, India's Minister for Ports, Shipping and Waterways, and Iran's Transport and Urban Development Minister, Mehrdad Bazarpash, in Tehran. The new pact replaces a 2016 agreement which covered India's operations at Shahid Beheshti terminal in Chabahar Port and was renewed annually. Why is this deal historic? This is the first time India takes over the management of an overseas port that is expected to boost exponentially trade among India, Iran and Afghanistan. The Ministry of External Affairs has allocated 100 crore rupees for the Chabahar Port for the year 2024-25. The official statement released on Monday states this 10-year long-term lease agreement further strengthens the bilateral ties between the two countries while bolstering confidence and boosting trust of trading communities from the region. It adds, as part of the agreement, India will procure various equipment required to expand operations at the port. The agreement paves the way for enhanced trade and investment opportunities which could boost India's economic development. Union Minister Sonowal said, "With the signing of this contract, we have laid the foundations of India's long-term involvement at Chabahar." The Chabahar Port is being projected as a key hub for the International North-South Transport Corridor project, a 7,200-kilometer-long multi-mode transport project for moving freight between India, Iran, Afghanistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, Central Asia and Europe. It is expected to reduce transportation costs and time, thereby promoting trade between these regions. Many see this as India's answer to China's Belt and Road Initiative. As we mentioned, discussions on developing Chabahar Port were first held in 2003 during then Iranian President Mohammad Khatami's visit to India. New Delhi's interest in Chabahar came from the port's value as a gateway for Indian goods to reach markets in Afghanistan and Central Asia. In 2013, India committed to investing $100 million towards its development. A memorandum of understanding to develop the port was signed in May 2015. The contract was executed in 2016 during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Iran. The new pact replaces one-year contracts that were being signed to keep the port operational until now. That was a big disincentive for shippers to use the port as they were looking for a more permanent arrangement. Located in the Sistan-Baluchistan province on Iran's southwestern coast, Chabahar Port is at an important point on the Arabian Sea with easy access from India's west coast. Kandla Port in Gujarat is the closest port at 550 nautical miles, while the distance between Chabahar and Mumbai is 786 nautical miles. Since 2019, the port has handled more than 80,000 20-foot equivalent units or TEUs of container traffic and more than 8 million tons of bulk and general cargo. The port also offers an alternative route from the Strait of Hormuz for cargo traffic between Central Asian countries and Afghanistan. This diversification strengthens India's strategic position in the region. The port's integration with the special free zone augments its appeal, while India's incentives such as concessions on vessel-related charges and cargo charges bolster trade flows through Chabahar, fostering economic growth and cooperation. The deal is also significant as it comes amid geopolitical disruption in West Asia. In recent weeks, Iran and Israel have clashed militarily after Tehran accused Tel Aviv of launching an airstrike against an Iranian diplomatic building in Syria in the month of April. Iran also launched a barrage of missile and drone attacks on Israel. India has expressed concern as tensions rise in the region. It has maintained a diplomatic dialogue with Iran on issues of concern, such as attacks on India-linked ships by Yemen's Houthi rebels, who are believed to have links to Iran. Apart from its strategic importance, Chabahar Port also has the potential to generate considerable revenue. In the first half of financial year 2024-25, container cargo handling at the Shahid Beheshti terminal was pegged at 25.788 TEUs, while bulk cargo handling at around 1.5 million metric tons. The port's capacity for cargo handling is currently 8 million metric tons. India plans to expand this to 18 million metric tons in the next phase. India is looking to strengthen its presence in key infrastructure along the route passing through the Persian Gulf. The Adani Group already operates the Haifa port in Israel, and more port deals by Indian entities are expected in the region in the days ahead. Experts say cargo quantity may increase significantly if the port is linked to the rail network. India is also involved in the construction of the 700-kilometer Chabahar-Zahedan railway line. Not only that, India has major investment plans in Iran, largely centered around the Chabahar port, as it gives India a strategic advantage over both China and Pakistan, and is about 170 kilometers from Pakistan's Gwadar port. The question we're asking on Global Lens tonight is this: while India will certainly not back down from its strategically significant deal with Iran, having strongly asserted its strategic autonomy and independent foreign policy on the global stage on multiple occasions in the past, will the United States indeed impose sanctions on India, a country it often describes as a close strategic partner, one that it also needs as a countervailing force against an expansionist and aggressive China in the Indo-Pacific? Also, having stated back in 2018 that India's Chabahar port deal with Iran would be exempt from sanctions, why is Washington now threatening to renege on its commitment? Is it a mere pressure tactic or a warning shot to other countries who may be contemplating doing business with Iran? Or could the US in fact go ahead and carry out its threat? And if it does so, what would that mean for the otherwise growing India-US ties, with President Biden no less describing it as the defining partnership of the 21st century during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's state visit to the US last year?
These reports that Iran and India have signed a deal concerning the Chabahar port. I will let the government of India speak to its own foreign policy goals vis-a-vis the Chabahar port, as well as its own bilateral relationship with Iran. I will just say, as it relates to the United States, U.S. sanctions on Iran remain in place and will continue to enforce them. Anyone considering business deals with Iran, they need to be aware of the potential risk that they are opening themselves up to and the potential risk of sanctions.
So what could these developments mean? We'll discuss that with our panel of experts in just a moment after this quick break.
Has Allu Arjun arrived, or he's just taking off?
If I really want to hit a moon shot, I want the moon.
These are big stories.
It's very unique to Indian cinema.
What would be the relevance of tradition?
I would believe that the first change has to come in the mind.
World premiere on the 18th of May only on News9 Live at 9 p.m.
वो पूछते हैं कि हम कौन है गालिब, तुम बतलाओ कि हम बतलाएं क्या।
I told him, you do what you think is best, I will not insist.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's now go straight across to our guests. Joining me on the show tonight is Jaishankar Gupta, former Indian ambassador to the World Trade Organization, Dr. Rajan Kumar, professor at the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and in a moment we will be joined by Elizabeth Bro, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in London. A warm welcome to all my guests. Ambassador Jaishankar Gupta, if I could begin with you, the simple question really is, how significant is the Chabahar Port Agreement for India, and how real in your view is the threat that the US could indeed go ahead and impose sanctions on India for this deal?
Well, I'll take up the first part of the question that you have raised. And as is well known, India had built a 218-kilometer road from Dilaram in Afghanistan, western Afghanistan, to Garanj in Iran to supply from the Chabahar Port. And this initiative, as you have mentioned, was taken way back in 2003. Now, India has supplied about 2.5 million tons of wheat to Afghanistan, 2,000 tons of pulses, and a lot of very essential items like malathion, which protects its agricultural produce from locusts. So it is extremely important for Afghanistan to start with, and India had entered into an agreement in 2016 with a trilateral agreement between India, Iran, and Afghanistan. So that is one part of the importance of this issue. As you have mentioned, the access to the Central Asian republics and then on to Russia and becoming a part of the international north-south corridor, that is extremely important because it will lead all the way up to St. Petersburg, which is on the sea. So that would open up a whole lot of countries in Eurasia. So that is the importance that is attached to this project. And the second thing is this Shah Beheshti terminal, it was being managed on an annual contract basis. Now with this 10-year contract and then extendable or automatic on automatic renewal basis, this gives India the elbow room to invest in a much more robust manner and build up the port. So that is the importance of this port. And the third thing is, because all the oil supplies to India, about 80% or slightly more, come from the Gulf at the moment. It is extremely important to have India's presence in the Persian Gulf. And later on, I'm not saying that it will happen tomorrow, it could translate into, something which will have some naval implications, etc., provided we work it out with the Iranians and the geopolitics allows us. Because Chabahar is not very far away from the Gwadar port, where the Chinese are building a very huge naval establishment. So that is the second very important geopolitical aspect of this project. As far as the US sanctions are concerned, which is the second part of your question, in 2017, when President Trump had come to power, India had worked out a deal because China was investing in the Belt and Road Initiative and making inroads into Afghanistan. And the Americans at that point of time were very keen to see to it that a civilian government in Afghanistan was able to continue in power. So they had said that the sanctions will not apply to the Chabahar port. Now things have changed because the Taliban has come to power, and the Americans have gone back on their word, and they are saying that they have not mentioned it very explicitly that India could face sanctions, but the implications are very clear that the intent is to perhaps scare away India or to deter it from investing in Chabahar and going forward. So we have to take it up with the Americans because we have a strategic partnership, and we have to tell them that this has got nothing to do with the Iranians supporting the Houthis, the Hamas and the other militias which are fighting Israel on another front.
Right.
And we have always been saying that we want a two-state solution there.
Yeah.
So we don't support terrorism, but this has got nothing to do with Iran's politics. This has got everything to do with trade, with the development of Afghanistan and Central Asia, and also to act as a counterpoint to China.
Exactly, and I want to dwell on that a bit more in the next segment. Let's not forget, India is one of the first few countries that actually strongly condemned the terror attacks that took place in southern Israel on the 7th of October, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, no less, issuing a statement expressing solidarity with Israel. Talking about the US, well, why is it going back on its word remains a million-dollar question, because remember, when the US State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel was pointedly asked, will India's Chabahar Port deal with Iran be exempt from sanctions, his answer was no. What does that mean? We look at that on the other side of this quick break.
I don't think anybody has isolated Ajit Dada Pawar. Ajit Dada has isolated himself.
That led to a lot of bad blood between the ruling partners.
It is not true. You know it very well, who these elements are, who these individuals are. And these are the very reasons why you see a division in the party.
Now this contest between Supriya Sule and Sunetra Pawar is really a proxy war between uncle and nephew, and it's being fought in the family bastion of Baramati.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
I try and convert almost everything in a kind of a mathematical formula.
You should always stretch more than you can reach.
Listening is very important.
Because if you don't listen, how would you know what the problem is?
Everybody who's working in and around me, their personal well-being is also a responsibility that I carry.
Great leaders have shared vision.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let me now go across to Dr. Rajan Kumar. Dr. Kumar, we will talk about the significance of the Chabahar Port in just a moment. Of course, it's been quite nicely delineated by our first guest, Ambassador Jan Das Gupta. But the question I want to ask you is this. Why do you believe the United States is reneging on its commitment when just a few years ago it had said that India's Chabahar Port deal with Iran would be exempt from sanctions. Today, when the US State Department Deputy Spokesperson was asked a similar question, he said, anyone contemplating doing business with Iran would need to be aware of the risk of sanctions. And when asked specifically about the Chabahar port in India, his answer was no exemption. The point is, as was pointed out by the ambassador earlier, the United States calls India one of its closest strategic partners. President Biden, no less, while welcoming Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the South Lawns of the White House last year during that state visit, described the India-US bilateral relationship as the defining partnership of the 21st century. Therefore, why this threat and why now? Is it a warning shot possibly to other countries who might be contemplating doing business with Iran? Or is it in fact to tell India, do not go beyond this deal? Because it is known that India has larger investment interests in Iran that actually go beyond the Chabahar port, isn't it?
Thank you for asking me this question. This is important because the timing when US is trying to put pressure on India, when you already said that Chabahar was waived from the sanction earlier, so why now? I think there are two reasons for that. First, that when US forces were there in Afghanistan and it was being managed by the United States, and India invested heavily in Afghanistan, roughly $2.7 billion. So US was very keen to get supplies from India, even if that comes through a port called Chabahar, which is in Iran. So that was that was the first reason why that time sanction was not imposed on India on the issue of Chabahar. And the second, what has happened recently, that the tension between Iran and the United States, as you know, because of the war in Gaza, so that has intensified. And US is trying to send a very clear signal to all the countries that it's not just the primary sanction, which is on the country, directly on the country, for instance, on Iran or on Russia, but also US may put secondary sanction, which is a little complicated. But yeah, US is trying to say that it might put secondary sanctions on other countries which are trading or which are doing some business with Iran. As you know, that our business with Iran has completely stopped. And the sad part is that US has sanctioned all the countries which are energy rich, most of the countries which are energy rich, be it Venezuela, Iran, and now Russia also, you see. So it has become extremely difficult for a country, a starving country like India, to acquire energy from other sources. So India cannot actually come under pressure. India should not come under pressure, and India has to convey this message very clearly that Chabahar is important for energy reasons, but also, as Ambassador rightly pointed out, that Chabahar was initially visualized to kind of enhance trade with Afghanistan. Unfortunately, after the Taliban came to power, our trade and our relationship with Afghanistan completely got disrupted. And after that, we started finding new kind of importance for Chabahar. So what India started doing, that India has been asking that Chabahar should become the part of INSTC, International North-South Transport Corridor. Technically, till now, it is not the part of INSTC. So trade in INSTC was through Bandar Abbas, which is another port in Iran. But now India is asking that this Chabahar is important, and we, also partly because there is one important reason. This 2 years back, our trade with Russia was only $10 billion. But today, because of energy import from Russia, our trade has gone up to more than $50 billion. So for that reason, this port becomes important. We need to send products to Central Asia, but also to Russia. The importance of Chabahar, the importance got faded, partly because of one of the reasons that the idea was that we'll send product from Mumbai to Chabahar and through that to Astrakhan, St. Petersburg, and also to Europe. Now the problem is that we cannot send the product to Europe through Russia. So we also planned IMEC, in India Middle East Economic Corridor, and unfortunately that
unfortunately got stalled because of the Israel-Hamas war.
Yeah, but Chabahar is extremely important for, as Ambassador pointed out, because of security reasons. And this is very close to Gwadar Port, so it becomes not a rival, because BRI is a huge product, and we are investing only less than $1 billion in Chabahar. So we cannot say that it's rivaling China. But again, is important because this will give connection to Afghanistan, but also to Central Asian countries, and they are extremely important for us, not maybe for economic reasons, but for geopolitical and security reasons. And as I said, if INSTC becomes functional, so then it becomes extremely important for importing products from Russia through Central Asia.
Absolutely. So it is significant for India in multiple ways, but how are we going to navigate this geopolitical minefield where the US is threatening India with sanctions? We'll discuss that with our guest. Elizabeth Bro is also with us now, but we need to take a quick break. We'll be back.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
There's a new video around what deepfake can do.
We have seen a trailer of this a few days back.
Rumors should not be only on the platform.
We'll have to wait and see how those play out.
Hindenburg's report cannot be taken as gospel of truth.
Has Allu Arjun arrived or he's just taking off?
If I really want to hit a moon shot, I want the moon.
These are big stories.
It's very unique to Indian cinema.
What would be the relevance of tradition?
I would believe that the first change has to come in the mind.
World premiere on the 18th of May, only on News9 Live at 9 p.m.
The game of power politics has begun. The poll bugle has been sounded. Who will receive the death blow? Who will be checkmated? It still remains to be seen.
ये दिखाता है हर कार्यकर्ता का बुलंद हौसला।
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
That ink is a semi-permanent dye called the indelible ink.
We are the sole manufacturer of this indelible ink.
Don't try to repair something which is working.
And if you have facial recognition, you can go vote in any booth anywhere based on where you are, and then it will be recorded that you can't vote anywhere else again.
Can we retire indelible ink and use biometrics? Theoretically, my answer would be yes.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's now go across to our guest, Elizabeth Bro, who joins us live from London. Elizabeth, welcome to Global Lens. The simple question I want to put to you is this. Why would the United States go back on its commitment and threaten India, a country that it describes as a close strategic partner, with sanctions for going ahead with the Chabahar Port agreement with Iran?
So what is happening is that ports have become
focal point in geopolitics. Authorities, governments have discovered that, ports are not just commercial operations, they may have geopolitical implications, and most importantly, or most immediately, Western governments have and other governments have discovered that maybe it wasn't such a good idea to let Chinese companies operate and own their ports. And as a result of that, there is enormous awareness all of a sudden into port ownership and operations everywhere, which is why I think the US government has all of a sudden discovered that, maybe it's not such a good idea for India and Iran to be working together, an Indian company to be as closely linked to this Iranian port as it will be through this deal.
Okay, and of course, our other guests have, mentioned that perhaps it has a lot to do with the fact that there is no longer an American presence in Afghanistan. As long as the US troops were stationed there, they viewed this deal very differently. But let me go back to Ambassador Jan Dasgupta at this point. So I want to ask you a two-pronged question. It is very clear that the Chabahar port gives India a strategic advantage over both China and Pakistan. While I agree that the scale of BRI is much, much bigger, but would it be correct to say that to some extent, the Chabahar port is India's answer to the Belt and Road Initiative? That's one. And two, again, I ask the same question. Why would the United States threaten India, a close strategic partner, with sanctions, especially given, as you mentioned earlier, that the United States does need India as a countervailing force against China, an increasingly expansionist and aggressive China, to keep it in check in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The first thing is that the Belt and Road Initiative is worth, in Pakistan alone, it is worth more than $60 billion or so. And most of it is, of course, concentrated in energy, including nuclear energy. But a lot of it is going into roads and to the construction of the Chabahar port, the Gwadar port. So we can't really compare our investment, which is less than $1 billion at the moment, to the development of the Chabahar port. But with this 10-year contract, and if the sanctions can be waived off by diplomatic negotiations and by telling our side of the story, and the issue about the counterpoint or the countervailing force against China and the increasing influence of China in that region to the Americans, I'm sure the Americans will perhaps, if not giving a clean waiver, would, brush it under the carpet for the time being, as they have done in the past also. India, even when the sanctions were imposed from 1979 onwards, they have been in place since then in one form or the other. India has had one bank, the United Commercial Bank, which has since, I think, merged with another nationalized bank, which did not have, at that point of time, any foreign branch. So it was, to a certain extent, immune from sanctions, and India operated through that bank. So mechanisms can be found out, but if the US is intent on not letting any Indian entity, and especially Chabahar Port is going to be managed by Indian Ports Global Limited, which is a Government of India entity, that would come in the way. So there are these issues which have to be negotiated, tackled, and resolved to develop our interest in Chabahar and further to integrate it with the international North-South transport corridor. Only then we will be able to achieve our full objectives and to get the benefits from the full potential of this investment. And I think India is now in a happy position to invest much more in Chabahar, to strengthen it and to develop the rail network But at the moment, the international North-South transport corridor talks about cargo from Chabahar going to Bandar Abbas and then going to overland to Bandar-e-Anzali on the Caspian Sea, southern part of Caspian Sea, and then to Astrakhan, crossing the Caspian Sea, Astrakhan in southern Russia, and from there it will go all the way to St. Petersburg by rail. So that is the international North-South transport corridor as it stands today, which is basically an agreement between Russia and Iran. So we want to be a part of it, and we want to also serve our strategic interests in Central Asia.
Absolutely. It is to secure our strategic interests in Central Asia. Dr. Rajan Kumar, my apologies for deviating from this subject, but there's some breaking news coming in, and I'd like your thoughts on that because you've been on this show to discuss the Israel-Hamas war with us multiple times. There are reports coming in suggesting that firefighters are currently battling a large fire at a warehouse complex at the Tel Hashomer military base in Ramat Gan in Israel. The warehouses were used to store various equipment. The Fire and Rescue Services says 28 firefighting teams are currently at the scene. The cause of the blaze is not known and currently under investigation. Now,